Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching the massive alien fleet arrange itself in perfect formation outside Earth's atmosphere. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Organic curves that seemed to breathe, surfaces that shifted like living skin, and weapons that pulsed with an inner light that made her stomach turn. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the flagship," Communications Officer Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded. "Put it through." The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a figure that defied every expectation humanity had about alien life. She was tall, graceful, with features that were hauntingly beautiful, yet undeniably otherworldly. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Most striking was how familiar she looked, as if someone had taken human features and refined them to impossible perfection. "I am Empress Zalthara of the Veltar Dominion," the figure spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in ways human ears weren't designed to process. "I have come seeking my lost children." Sarah exchanged glances with her bridge crew. "Your Majesty, I'm Captain Chen of the Earth Defense Force. I'm not sure what children you're referring to. This is humanity's home system." The Empress tilted her head, and something flickered across her features. Surprise, perhaps even pain. "Humanity?" She stepped closer to her own transmission device, studying Sarah with intense focus. "Show me more of your people. Quickly." Rodriguez worked frantically at his console, pulling up feeds from major population centers around Earth. The screens filled with images of humans going about their daily lives, children playing in parks, workers in cities, families gathered around dinner tables. The Empress watched in silence for long moments, her expression shifting through emotions that seemed both alien and heartbreakingly familiar. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "By the ancient codes, it cannot be." "Your Majesty?" Sarah prompted, unease growing in her chest. "Captain Chen?" the Empress said, her voice gaining strength and authority. "Tell me of your origins, your oldest stories, your creation myths. Tell me what you know of how humanity came to be." Sarah felt the weight of her crew's stares. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. "Our scientists believe we evolved on Earth over millions of years. Our oldest stories speak of various creation myths, but—" "No," the Empress interrupted, her eyes now blazing with an inner fire. "Before that, your genetics, your rapid development, the anomalies your scientists cannot explain, the missing links in your evolutionary chain." Dr. Martinez, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, there are certain irregularities in human development that we've never fully understood. Genetic bottlenecks that should have destroyed our species, sudden leaps in intelligence and tool use, physiological adaptations that seem almost designed." The Empress closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Sarah saw something that chilled her to the bone, maternal fury mixed with devastating grief. 50,000 of your years ago," the Empress began, her voice taking on the cadence of ancient history, "the Veltar Dominion faced a crisis that threatened not just our empire, but all intelligent life in this galaxy. A plague of darkness was spreading. The Devourers, entities that consumed not just matter and energy, but consciousness itself." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant thrum of the alien fleet outside. "We had technology beyond your current understanding, mastery over genetics and consciousness that allowed us to shape life itself, but we were dying. The Devourers had learned to target our specific neural patterns, our unique genetic markers. They were hunting us to extinction." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "What does this have to do with—" "Everything," the Empress said, her voice breaking slightly. In desperation, our greatest scientists conceived a plan. We would take our genetic template, our consciousness patterns, our very essence, and hide it where the devourers would never think to look. We would plant it in primitive species across 1,000 worlds, hoping that someday, somehow, our children would grow to reclaim the stars. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, his face pale. You're saying Earth was one of those worlds. You, humanity, are our descendants, our children. We seeded your planet with Veltar genetic material, carefully integrated into your developing species. We gave you our adaptability, our resilience, our capacity for both great love and terrible destruction. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. That's impossible. We would know. Our scientists would have detected. Your scientists are closer than you think, the Empress said softly. The anomalies in your genome that they called junk DNA, the sudden appearance of certain genetic markers with no evolutionary precedent, the way your species develops technology at an impossible rate once it reaches a certain threshold. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the human faces on her screen with something that looked like wonder. We encoded instructions into your very cells, dormant, until your species reached sufficient technological development. Instructions that would make you irresistible to our enemies, unsurvivable in normal galactic society, and absolutely unstoppable once awakened. Awakened how? Sarah asked, though part of her already feared the answer. The Empress's expression darkened. Through conflict, through necessity, through the kind of pressure that turns carbon into diamonds. She leaned forward, her alien features fierce with protective anger. Tell me, Captain Chen, what has happened to my children? What trials have you faced? What has forged you in the fires we could not have predicted? Sarah thought of humanity's history. The wars, the genocides, the struggles for survival, the way humans had learned to fight not just for resources, but for ideas, for freedom, for the right to exist. We fought, she said simply. We've fought each other, fought our environment, fought for every advance we've made. We've nearly destroyed ourselves 12 times over. The Empress nodded slowly. Good. That is the tempering we designed you for. But now I must know. What threatens you now? Why do my children call out in distress across the void? Sarah's blood ran cold. Your Majesty, we didn't call for help. We've been alone. We thought we were alone. No, the Empress said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried immense power. 2 cycles ago, we detected massive distress signals from this sector, signals that matched the genetic frequency we encoded into our hidden children. Something has found you, hasn't it? Before Sarah could answer, klaxons began blaring throughout the ship. Rodriguez's hands flew over his console, his face draining of color. Captain, he called out, his voice cracking with fear. Massive energy signatures detected at the edge of the solar system. Ships, if you can call them that. They're unlike anything in our databases or theirs. He gestured toward the Veltar fleet. The Empress's face transformed into something terrible and beautiful, a mother's love twisted into a weapon of pure fury. The Devourers, she whispered, and her ships began to move, taking defensive positions around Earth. After all this time, they have found my children. The Devourer ships materialized at the edge of the solar system like wounds torn in reality itself. They weren't built so much as grown from some nightmare fusion of technology and hunger. Dark metal that seemed to absorb light twisted around cores that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Captain Chen watched the tactical display with growing horror as the alien vessels moved with predatory grace toward Earth. The Veltar fleet, impressive as it was, suddenly seemed fragile against the approaching darkness. How many? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Scanner readings are inconsistent, Rodriguez replied, his voice strained. The ships seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Conservative estimate puts their fleet at 200 vessels, but they could have twice that number. Empress Zalthara's image flickered on the main screen, her attention divided between the human bridge and her own fleet commanders. Captain Chen, you must understand what you face. The Devourers are not merely conquerors. They are erasers. They don't just kill civilizations. They remove them from existence entirely. No traces remain, no memories, no echoes in the cosmic background. Then why haven't you destroyed them already? Sarah demanded. You have advanced technology, superior numbers. Because they learn, the Empress replied, her voice heavy with the weight of eons. Every time we fight them, they adapt. They consume not just flesh and metal, but information, experience, consciousness itself. Every battle makes them stronger. Dr. Martinez studied the readings flowing across his console. Your Majesty, our sensors are detecting something unusual about their approach pattern. They're not heading directly for Earth or your fleet. They're circling? The Empress's eyes widened in alarm. They're studying you, analyzing the genetic markers, the consciousness patterns. They know what you are now. She turned to someone off-screen, speaking rapidly in a language that sounded like musical mathematics. Admiral Thompson's gruff voice crackled over the comm from Earth Defense Command. Captain Chen, we're reading massive energy buildups across the Devourer fleet. Whatever they're planning, it's big. Empress, Sarah called out. What can you tell us about their weapons, their tactics? They fight by consumption, Zalthara replied, her ships moving into defensive formations around Earth's orbital installations. Their weapons don't destroy, they devour. Matter, energy, even time itself can be unmade by their technology. But, she paused, studying something on her own displays. There's something different about their approach this time. They're being cautious. They should have attacked immediately upon detecting our presence, but instead they're hesitant? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez, who had been running continuous scans on the Devourer fleet, suddenly straightened with excitement. Captain, I think I know why they're hesitating. The genetic markers the Empress mentioned, they're not just dormant in humans. They're active, and they're broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Sarah demanded. Immunity signals, Martinez replied, his voice rising with amazement. The same consciousness patterns the Devourers use to target their prey. Humans are generating interference signals, natural interference. We're like static on their targeting systems. The Empress's expression shifted from concern to something resembling hope. The encoding worked better than we dared dream. You're not just hidden from them. You're actively defended against their primary weapons. That's great news. Admiral Thompson's voice cut in. But they're still moving toward Earth, and I've got reports of energy discharges beginning. Whatever immunity we have, they're adapting around it. Sarah made a command decision that would have seemed insane an hour ago. Empress, what do you need from us? How do we fight them? You don't understand, Zalthara replied. Your people cannot fight them. No conventional force can. The Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time. Weapons pass through them, shields are consumed, tactics become irrelevant when your enemy can simply unmake your strategies from existence. Then how? There is one possibility, the Empress interrupted, her voice carrying both hope and terrible uncertainty. The encoding we placed in your species wasn't just for protection, it was also a weapon. But activating it... She looked directly at Sarah, her alien features heavy with maternal concern. The process would change your people permanently. You would become something new, something that could stand against the Devourers, but you would no longer be purely human. Sarah felt the weight of species-wide decisions settling on her shoulders. What kind of change? Enhanced consciousness, expanded dimensional awareness, the ability to manipulate reality at the quantum level. You would become what your mythologies call gods, but you would also become targets for every force in the galaxy that fears such power. Before Sarah could respond, the ship shuddered under an impact that shouldn't have been possible. The Devourers had begun their attack, and their weapons were reaching through space to strike at targets they couldn't quite fully perceive. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, panic creeping into his voice. "Earth Defense Grid is reporting massive casualties. The orbital stations, they're not just being destroyed, they're being erased, like they never existed." On the main screen, they watched in horror as humanity's greatest defensive installations simply vanished, leaving no debris, no energy signatures, nothing at all, where massive structures had been moments before. "Time is running short," the Empress said urgently. "The decision must be made now. Allow me to activate the encoding in your genetics, or watch your species be consumed into nothingness." Sarah looked around her bridge at faces filled with fear, determination, and trust in her judgment. These were her people, humanity's representatives in this impossible moment. "If we do this," she asked, "what happens to our children? Our future?" "They become the guardians of this galaxy," the Empress replied. "Protectors not just of themselves, but of every species the Devourers would consume. The responsibility is immense, but so is the power to fulfill it." Another impact, stronger this time, and Sarah felt something fundamental shift in the ship's systems. The Devourers were adapting their weapons, finding ways around humanity's natural immunity. "Admiral Thompson," Sarah called to Earth Defense Command, "what's the status planetside?" "We're evacuating population centers, but Captain, these things are moving faster than we can track. They'll reach Earth's surface within the hour." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter safe in the Colorado bunkers, of the billions of humans who trusted their defenders to keep them safe, of the choice between certain extinction and uncertain transformation. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. "Empress Zalthara," she said formally, "on behalf of humanity and Earth Defense Command, I request that you activate the encoding." The Empress nodded solemnly. "The process cannot be reversed once begun. Are you certain?" "Do it." The Empress began speaking in her musical language, her hands dancing over controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Around Earth, the Veltar ships began to emit a harmonious frequency that resonated through space itself. Sarah felt it first as a tingling in her fingertips, then as warmth spreading through her chest. Around the bridge, her crew members were experiencing the same sensation, their expressions shifting from confusion to wonder to something approaching awe. "What's happening to us?" Dr. Martinez whispered, staring at his hands as they began to emit a faint luminescence. "You're becoming what you were always meant to be," the Empress replied softly. "My beautiful, dangerous children, awakening to your true nature." The transformation was spreading across Earth's population, 50 billion humans simultaneously evolving into something unprecedented, and in the darkness between stars, the Devourers suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they had never encountered before, prey that could fight back. The change swept through humanity like wildfire, but it wasn't the violent transformation Sarah had feared. Instead, it felt like waking up after a lifetime of dreaming, like suddenly being able to see colors that had always existed but never been perceived. Captain Chen looked at her hands and saw not just flesh and bone, but the quantum structures that held them together, the probability clouds that defined their existence in space-time. When she looked at her crew, she could sense their thoughts, their emotions, their growing understanding of what they were becoming. "Status report," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship's hull itself. "Captain," Rodriguez replied, his eyes now glowing with soft silver light. "I'm reading everything. Communication channels I never knew existed, data streams flowing between dimensions, and the Devourer fleet." He paused, his enhanced perception processing impossible amounts of information. "They're afraid." On the main screen, the approaching enemy vessels had slowed their advance. Their predatory confidence was replaced by something Sarah could now sense directly: confusion, alarm, and for the first time in their ancient existence, genuine fear. Empress Zalthara appeared relieved but cautious. "The transformation is complete, but now comes the true test. The Devourers will not retreat simply because you have changed. They will adapt, as they always do." Dr. Martinez stood up from his station, moving with fluid grace that spoke of perfect awareness of his body in space. "Your Majesty, I'm detecting massive power buildups in their fleet. They're preparing some kind of concentrated assault." "The erasure protocol," the Empress confirmed grimly. "They mean to remove not just your current existence, but your entire timeline. If they succeed, humanity will never have existed." Sarah felt a cold rage building within her, but it was different from any anger she had known before. This fury existed across multiple dimensions, touched probability itself, and carried the weight of species-wide determination. "Admiral Thompson," she called to Earth Defense Command, "how are our people handling the change?" The Admiral's voice came back transformed, carrying new depths of understanding. "Captain, it's remarkable. Panic has given way to purpose. People aren't just accepting what's happened, they're embracing it. Military personnel are reporting enhanced coordination, scientists are seeing solutions to problems they never understood before, and civilians are organizing defense efforts with impossible efficiency." Through her expanded awareness, Sarah could sense the truth of his words. Across Earth, 8 billion humans were becoming something unprecedented. Individuals who could think and act with collective consciousness while retaining their personal identity. "The Devourers are beginning their final approach," the Empress warned. "Whatever you're going to do, it must be now." Sarah didn't need to give orders. Her crew, her species, already knew what was required. Around Earth, humans began to act with unified purpose while maintaining their individual will, a paradox that should have been impossible but felt as natural as breathing. The planet's defense grid, moments before reduced to scattered wreckage, began to reform. Not from metal and electronics, but from pure will made manifest. Orbital platforms materialized from crystallized thought, weapon systems that fired concentrated purpose rather than energy beams. "Impossible," the Empress whispered, watching displays that showed Earth transforming into something that existed simultaneously in physical space and pure concept. "In 50,000 years of planning, we never imagined." The Devourer fleet struck with everything they had. Reality-shearing weapons that could unmake matter struck Earth's new defenses and simply stopped. The attacks weren't blocked or deflected. They were politely but firmly refused permission to exist in the same space as humanity's will to survive. Sarah found herself standing on the bridge not just physically but as a representative of every human choice to fight, to protect, to endure. She spoke to the Devourer fleet with a voice that carried the authority of an entire species. "You have consumed civilizations across this galaxy for millions of years," she said, her words traveling through dimensions the enemy had thought were their exclusive domain. "You have erased entire peoples from existence, removed their potential futures, devoured their dreams." The Devourer response came as a wave of alien hunger and contempt, but Sarah felt her species absorb the attack and transform it into something else entirely: understanding, pity, and an implacable determination to end their reign of consumption. "We are humanity," she continued. And now her voice was joined by billions of others, each individual yet part of something greater. We are the children of Earth, the heirs of Veltar, and the guardians of what will be. Your hunger ends here. The battle that followed couldn't be described in conventional terms. It was fought across multiple dimensions, with weapons made of crystallized concepts and shields forged from collective will. Humanity didn't just fight the Devourers, they taught them new ways to exist. Where Devourer ships had been creatures of pure consumption, human intervention showed them the possibility of creation. Where they had known only hunger, humanity offered the concept of satisfaction. Where they had existed as destroyers of potential, humans demonstrated the beauty of building futures. The transformation was gradual, but inevitable. One by one, Devourer vessels stopped their attack and began to change. Their dark hulls began to gleam with inner light, their weapons transformed into tools of construction, and their hunger evolved into curiosity. "What have you done?" the lead Devourer entity asked, its voice carrying wonder instead of malice for the first time in eons. "We've given you a choice," Sarah replied simply. "You can continue as you were, consuming and erasing, or you can join us in building something better." Empress Zalthara watched in amazement as the greatest threat to galactic civilization was transformed not through destruction, but through the most human of gifts, the opportunity for redemption. "My children," she said softly, tears streaming down her luminous cheeks, "you have exceeded every hope we dared to hold. You are not just our heirs, you have become our teachers." As the last of the Devourer fleet accepted transformation, Sarah felt the weight of new responsibility settling on humanity's shoulders. They had become guardians not just of Earth, but of the galaxy itself. The power to reshape reality came with the obligation to use it wisely. "What happens now?" Dr. Martinez asked, his enhanced perception already beginning to map the possibilities stretching into the future. Sarah looked out at the stars, seeing them not just as distant lights but as destinations, as homes for civilizations that would need protection, guidance, and the chance to grow into their own potential. "Now," she said, "we do what humans have always done. We explore, we learn, we protect those who need protection, and we build a future worth living in." The Empress smiled, an expression of maternal pride that transcended species boundaries. "Welcome to your inheritance, my children. The galaxy has been waiting for you." As Earth's new defenses settled into permanent configurations, and the transformed Devourer fleet took positions as allies rather than enemies, humanity began to understand the full scope of what they had become. They were no longer just another species struggling for survival. They were the bridge between what was and what could be, guardians of potential itself. And in the depths of space, other civilizations began to detect strange new signals, messages of hope, offers of alliance, and the promise that the age of consumption was over. The age of creation had begun.